Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so where we left off on the last one is we pretty much finished the interior part of the eye, not, the eyeball itself, not the skin in and around it. So I'm just going to show you a couple finishing touches that we could do on this eye, and then I'm going to get us started on working on the skin itself. So again, I'm going to go through over here. I've got my different layers set up. I've got my pupil, I've got my iris, I've got the white of the eye. I've got them all separate pieces. I also still have all my outlines here, which are going to be helpful to me in a minute. And really the one I want right now, as you can see, I did, when I did the iris part, the color part of the eye, some of that sort of sneaks in underneath the lid. You see that sticking out on my particular picture. The first thing I want to do is I want to clean that up. So I'm going to bring back my outline for the eye. You can see it in red there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and I'm going to pick up my magic wand. And again, let me make sure that I'm on the eye layer. It's important that that's highlighted blue so you know it's on the layer. And then I'm going to click this time on the outside. First time to work on it, I clicked on the inside. This time I'm going to work on the outside. And now I'm just going to grab my eraser tool, see that everything is set up, the hardness all the way up. Size is fine, opacity and flow at 100%, and then I should be able to erase that, and all I have to do is click back on the iris layer. Yep. Okay, and then that should be able to be erased nice and easy. Why was it like that? Because I've already selected the outside area, so no matter how much I try to erase over here, nothing's going to happen. I can only erase in this area. So I've cleaned that part of the iris, the eye up. A couple other little things and a new tool I'm going to show you over here. What I'm going to do is now deselect, Control D. I'm going to get rid of my shape just so I can see it as is. I'm going to zoom in and you can kind of see the iris of my eyes. It's a little rough looking. It's a little pixelated because it's hard edged and the size of the file. I kind of want to smoothen that out. I want to smooth out some of these other things in the edge over here. So while I'm on this iris of the eye, I'm going to go to a new tool, and that tool is this teardrop over here, and that's called the blur tool. It's underneath your paint bucket, eraser, paint bucket, or gradient tool, whichever you may have over there, and then the blur tool. It looks like a teardrop, and it's a brush. It's going to be set at 50%. I'm going to make my brush a little softer, and a little smaller. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag around the outside edge, and let me zoom in so you can see what the blur tool is going to do. Again, I'm on the iris of the eye layer, and see as I go over it how it basically just blurred that edge. So you see how you have this really sort of choppy, sawtooth edge to the picture because of the masking, the way we use the shape tool. Well, if I take the blur tool and I run my blur tool over it, it sort of takes the edge off of that, makes it look a little bit more like how it looks in the picture. And again, you could blur to your heart's content. I'm just going over it kind of like once, and that should be good. And take a little edge off the bottom too. You can see my iris, my pupil now. It's pretty hard edged as well. So I'm going to get my pupil. I'm going to switch to that layer. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of soften the edge. And you can see, I'm just going to do one half and the other. So just softening that edge really just kind of makes it seem a little bit more just smooth and blended out when you compare it to this side. So that's a little bit of the blur tool. Again, I would keep it at the default 50%, but change the size of the brush and keep the hardness somewhere in the middle. And that's something you can go to and go to each one of your layers that you feel needs it. In this case, my highlight can kind of take off some of the hardness of the edge there. You can see that it's blurring that out. So that's another little tool, only a new thing I want to really show you here. So I'm going to use that to kind of fix up my edges. I might want to go to the white of the eye and just kind of take some of these light things down a little bit. And I should be good. I can always do this edge too. It won't hurt. And some of you with the masking and the way it goes, you've mentioned to me before, you get like a little line or a little edge in between this and other parts. I think if you use the blur tool, it kind of keeps things looking a little less mechanical and digital and makes it look a little bit more like it's been hand airbrushed. or drawn. So subtle little difference. Obviously I've cleaned at the bottom over here. Now I'm ready to start doing the skin. So I'm not going to flatten out any of these layers. I want to keep it so I can always come back later on and add some more detail and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back to my eye layer, and I'm going to click on the outside of that because I want to leave this eye alone and I want to work on all the skin and I don't want to corrupt anything around it. And now that it's selected, I'm going to switch from the eye layer and I'm going to go back down here and just create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer skin. All right. And just like I worked before, I'm going to go switch over to my brush. I'm going to start with white. I'm going to keep my opacity and flow pretty low. I think I'm going to start with a nice large brush. I'm going to do my big basic blocking out of color, and then I'm going to slowly start working smaller and smaller. So I'll just go up here, and it's okay that I am working over top of the lines and everything else like that. We can clean this up after the fact. So what I want to do is I want to kind of start in with my basic shades. I got a little bit of lightness, and I'm working with a really light opacity and light flow, but it gives me a little bit more control. And again, I don't want to cover anything up too quickly over here. I'm kind of going over it a bunch of times to build up that sort of base layer of white. I got a little bit of brightness in here, some up here in this part of the eye. And I like to work for larger areas like this. I like to work with a nice soft brush, low opacity, low flow, and get some basic color down first, and that way we'll keep everything really blended. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to up my opacity a little bit, up my flow just a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and add a little bit more brightness. So I got like this top corner over here. I kind of catch that top corner over here that's going to be pretty bright. All right, I got a little bit of brightness over here, pretty substantial little hot spot. I've got a little bit here underneath the eye. And again, start with a large brush on low settings and get some of the basic value in. And it's okay that I'm going over this other stuff. I'm going to trim all that out later on and kind of get a little bit more of the basic color of white in there. And now the same thing. I'm going to switch up my opacity a little bit, up my flow a little bit, and I'm going to make my brush a little softer and a bunch smaller. And I'm going to go look for some of these a little bit more brightness. I'm going to try to catch a little bit of that, starting to create a little bit of an edge over here where we have that sort of transition from a really bright white. Get a little bit over here. I'm going to start with that nose. We got a little bit brightness I might want to bring in over here. I'm going to try to get a little bit of that in there. Don't love the way that came out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. I'll lower my flow just a little bit. It's a little better. And again, gives you the opportunity. The thing about digital is you can always come back and undo something and make it look as if it never was there in the first place. So if I feel like too much paint is coming out too fast for me, this is a space where I'll sort of adjust my brush to kind of make the flow and the opacity a little bit lower. I'll start a little bit of what's going to be my lid here. And just seeing where there's some of the light. And catches it. A little bit more white right in here for a hot spot. A little bit of white in the top corner. A little bit of light come through there, and it's slowly but surely starting to get there. Again, gonna lower my brush size, get a little smaller. Not that small, but start trying to creeping in to get a little bit more of the fine detail. Lower that. A little bit more of that. I'm going to come through, and I think at this point now I want to try to add some of my dark. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit, and what I'm going to do is, let me just rename this. I'm going to call this Skin White, and I'm going to create a new layer above it, and I'm going to call it Skin Black. Okay, and I know I got a lot of layers going on, but I want to kind of keep things so I can still edit them later on. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to switch over to my black, and again, really lowering my numbers here. A little bit of black goes a long way. In fact, I'm going to start really low at first. And what I want to do is I want to start by trying to pull out a little bit of this crease that's happening over here. I'm going to open up that eyelid a little bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of shading underneath it, like in this area. So let's get a smaller brush. I'm going to zoom in. And it may not look like I'm doing a lot, but a little bit goes a long way. And I recommend that you add the darkness little by little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to add a little bit more there. Right in that crease in that fold. You look in there, there's a little bit of darkness in there. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit in that crease in that fold. I'm going to look in here. I can see like I probably want to make in here just a little bit darker. And you can see how lightly I am adding black. And really the best thing to do is to not overdo this. You do want to try, always keep in mind you can make things darker. This is just your first sort of base coat. And where I started with the white with a really big brush, with the black I'm kind of starting with a small brush and working my way up because I don't need much done. So I'm going to enlarge that brush in here a little bit, and I'm going to add a little bit more shadow right in there. I'm going to try to add a little bit right in here. And now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit up here. It's slightly darker, so this is one of the areas I'll grab just a little bit of a bigger brush. And a little bit of volume. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here with a little bit of a smaller brush. And I'm just going to start that's a little too small. Let's go. And if you have your device and you have the pen with it or the stylus, you might find it might be a little easier to work with the stylus at this point. I'm just working with my trackpad over here. My sausage fingers get in the way sometimes, so I'm not absolutely thrilled with every single mark that I'm making, but I'm pretty close. And now I want to see is I kind of want to create a situation over here where I can kind of use this line that I've created to help me out on the shading. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to deselect everything for a second. All right, I'm going to take a look at how that looks. And then what I want to do is I've got my eyelid over there, and instead of the magic wand or any of this other stuff like that, what I want to get to is I want to get to my magnetic lasso tool. Now, this will be a little bit of a trick. But the magnetic lasso tool, if you click onto something, it should try to trace along with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm tracing along that line that I've already created. And now that I don't have a line to follow, I'm just going to click once. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of create a big selection area around this. So you see what happens is I just selected the top part of this picture and I selected right along this edge. So now I'm going to take a look at how can I use that to my advantage. So if I take my brush tool and I try to paint down here, you're going to see nothing is happening. I'm sorry, I go back to the skin black. Paint down here, nothing is happening, but it can happen up top over here since that area is selected. I have like this nice harder edge over there. So by having that selected, I can kind of use that soft brush right on the edge, and it's not going to paint over this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the size of this brush, and then I'm going to just kind of try to create a little bit more of that shadow underneath that crease. And what's going to happen is, because I've sort of masked off that area with my magnetic lasso, you see that I can't paint down here. I can't paint on this part of it, but I can paint right on the edge of it. And what that's doing is that's going to help create that effect of creating a little bit of a fold and a crease. You see how I'm going over that edge. And I'll go just a little bit darker. I'm going to up my flow a little bit, and what I want to do is up the flow a lot. But I'm going to come in right in tight and just add a little bit more darkness right on the edge in there. And we'll take away our mask and everything to see what that looks like in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control D, and I'm going to make my eyelid disappear. You see it's created that nice little fold in there. And a little bit of the crease going on over there. Got a crease on the other side, so let's go back to my eyelid. And this time I'm going to grab my magnetic lasso tool, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to click once, and then I'm just going to drag my mouse along. Even if I'm a little off, it's still going to try to connect itself to this line. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask the underneath part of it. So you can see what I've selected. Kind of screwed up over here a little bit. If I don't like it, I did it wrong. Control D and do it again. Click once, and then just keep your mouse going along that blue line the best you can. It's going to kind of try to stay close. Let's see what that one looks like. That was a mess. One more time. All the way through, almost there. Click once, click again, and then, all right, so I've got an area like that over there. This is a little screwed up over here, but I think I can fix it later on. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go switch back to my skin black. I'm gonna grab that paintbrush with the dark color. I'm gonna lower this again. Take a look. It's on this part of the eyelid. So I'm gonna come in here, kind of darken in that a little bit. And that should give me a nice little dark here, so I'm just going to go over that. And I think I'm pretty pleased with that. I think I'll just add a little bit more right in that corner. Take a look at it. I'll do Control D. Got a little bit of an edge I don't like in there. I'm going to just come up in there and clean this up. One of the things I can do is use my brand new tool, my blur tool, make it a little bit larger. Above the edge over there. If I don't like that bump either, I can still go back and erase it too. Lower the opacity and the flow on that as well. Adjust mine. And my blur tool again. And it looks like I feel pretty good about what that looks like right now. So I've got my little edge going on over here. Let's see, I might need a little bit more darkness, so I'm still in the skin black. I'm gonna grab my paintbrush again, switch up my paintbrush, a little bit larger, keep the flow down low. And you know what? I could spend another hour or two on this, but I'm feeling pretty decent about it. I'm gonna just try to darken in again. I'll go back to my eye, and I want to mask that area off, so I'm just gonna click all the way around it. Come back to my skin black, and then grab my brush and just darken in a little bit of this edge here. A little too bright for my tastes. All right. Control D. I'll go deselect the eyeball. I feel pretty decent about this. And again, at this juncture, I don't want you to do any of the eyelashes. We'll add those in at the very, very last part of this thing. I do want to clean up the outside of this thing. So let's go back to our main background layer. Okay. And I'm going to grab my magic wand again, and I'm going to click on anywhere in the middle over here so you see the boundary box all the way around. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my skin white layer, hit delete, black layer, delete, Control D to deselect, and things should look pretty clean at this point. And I think that I got a decent start over here. Now, you might have more black in your picture. There may be areas that are darker and everything else like that. But at this juncture, I don't want you to do eyelashes, and I don't want you to do you shouldn't really do the eyebrows unless they're really heavy and really dark. Kind of leave it as if there are no eyebrows. We can add those in later. As always, save as a PSD. And I hope that was helpful. Again, the big new things over here is the blur tool and the magnetic lasso tool. So you can use those to kind of help you out throughout the ends. You can always do those manually with the eraser tool and the brush tool, but I find that you might find it a little easier this way. All right.